Welcome to Podcast Marketing Secrets, the place for entrepreneurs, coaches, and CEOs who are looking to grow their business with a podcast, become a key person of influence in their industry, and get their ideal clients to come to them, also known as attraction marketing. I'm your host, Al Morentin. My guest today is Roy Osing. Roy is a guy who took a startup internet company to $1 billion in sales. He is the only author, entrepreneur, and executive leader who delivers practical and proven, audacious, unheard of ways to produce high-performing businesses and successful careers. Roy is a former president, CMO, and entrepreneur with over 40 years of successful and unmatched executive leadership experience in every aspect of business. As president of a major data and internet company, his leadership and audacious, unheard of ways took the company from its early stage to $1 billion in annual sales. He is a blogger, content marketer, and mentor to young professionals. As an accomplished business advisor, he is the author of the no-nonsense book series, Be Different or Be Dead. With the audacious, unheard of ways, I took a startup to $1 billion in sales as his 7th book. Welcome to the show, Roy.
Thank you very much, Al. I'm honored to be here.
Awesome. So what is the idea behind the Be Different or Be Dead series?
Yeah, so it's all about differentiation and the fact that I've discovered that that the world, quite frankly, needs a lot of help in this respect, because my conclusion is that differentiation today is not well understood. It's not being practiced very well. And my observation, and we can talk about my solution to that as we go, but my observation is that the ultimate consequence of not being able to differentiate yourself in a way that your customers care about, and that's a key phrase, is that eventually as an organization, you die. Okay, you become irrelevant. And if you're not different in a way that's compelling, that happens. And that's a very extreme consequence, hence the use of the word dead at the end of it. I mean, I did it to, for shock value, but it's true. Organizations, companies die when they become irrelevant relative to their competition. And that's a horrific place to be in. I mean, from an employee point of view, a customer point of view, and a shareholder point of view. And so I started writing about my solution and to all of this several years ago. And I've been just banging away at it, trying to get people to realize that the old ways of academically thinking about differentiation simply don't work in the real world, and that there is a choice. And I figured it out, and it really helped me get to $1 billion. So there must be something to it, Al.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. And I do want to get into solutions for differentiation and talk about your latest book. But one quick question. If someone was like just to come into your ecosphere and they heard about Be Different or Be Dead series, what would you recommend? Would you recommend them go all the way back and start with the first book, or start with your most recent book?
I think start with the recent one. I mean, I wrote my original one. It was called Be Different or Be Dead, Your Business Survival Guide. And I wrote that in 2009 when the economy was quite challenging. And so I tended to emphasize the survivability, which really drives the same thing, right? I mean, Be Different or Be Dead is all about, okay, you're not going to end up very well if you can't be different. Yeah. And then since then, I wrote a number of ebooks, which basically did a deep dive on some of the subjects like leadership, like marketing in the storm, like career path planning and so forth. And then I decided basically to sort of uplift all of that by writing my 7th. So you can dive into that. It's an updated version. I've learned a lot more about my stuff the more I work with my stuff. And so you can take a deep dive in my 7th and get caught up. And then you can go back if you'd like. I mean, I tried to write it in modular way, and it's a how-to book, Al. It is not a theoretical treatise on blue oceans. Okay, this is a how-to book, okay, written by somebody that got $1 billion in sales by doing some rather non-traditional, unheard of, audacious things in quite frankly, a business that really wasn't open to that. I mean, this was part of the monopoly era in telecom that I actually had this opportunity. And so, I mean, there were horrific not horrific, but there were some pretty significant challenges in terms of culture and the way you did things and so forth that I had to battle against to try and move the business forward. And so it's a big learning lesson. And I just hope people have got the time to spend. I'm not prescribing it, Al. I'm just saying, hey, this is my experience. And if something excites you, if an idea excites you, great, take it and give it a try. Because if you do, I guarantee it will work, because it worked for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, and so is that what your new book is about?
Well, it basically talks to the practical and proven ways I took a startup to $1 billion in sales. And so it looks at the subject matter and slices it in terms of what are the leadership hints I've got, what are the secrets in marketing, what are the secrets in sales, what about business success, which is really a deep dive in terms of the planning approach that I had to create for myself to move this company forward. And then there's a piece on careers. And so, my experience has been very broad. I've had the fortune to be able to learn and practice in basically every function of business, with the exception of CFO. And I didn't want that anyways. I had to do finances as president of a company. That was close enough for me. Mm-hmm. And so it has a very significant range for people. And so if you're a young professional saying, you know what, I'm stuck in my career, I just need some ideas. Great. This book is for you. If you're in marketing and you're wanting and you have a thirst for stepping out of the marketing 101 box, good. Check it out. If you're in sales and you think your job is to earn your quota, but you know that life in sales has got to have a more longer term perspective, great. Check it out. And so it's meaningful and relevant, I hope, to basically anybody pursuing a career and anybody in business, any entrepreneur that is really looking for, where do I start? I got a really good message for entrepreneurs in terms of where to start, because I've worked with a lot of them, and a lot of them make some fundamental mistakes that end up costing them dearly in the first 3 or 4 years. They die, like the carnage on the road for most startups. And so it's a pretty significant road to go. And I think my book and my experience can help.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I was on your website and for the book, and I was looking over, and it said the organization's business plan must be focused on how to execute and must clearly define an unmatched competitive position. So what is an unmatched competitive position?
Yeah, and so let me just talk a little bit about this, because it's kind of like a segue from our previous conversation about differentiation in the world. My observation is that most organizations, when confronting the challenge to define what makes them special, typically rely on what I would call claptrap. These are words like better and best and number one and market leader, which quite frankly, Al, don't mean anything to customers. They're not believable, okay? But they're easy. They're lazy marketing. Or they rely on aspirations. You're like, we're in business to save the home planet. We believe in inclusivity. Well, good for you. The reality is that may be important for the value of your organization, but it's not particularly helpful to a customer that's trying to make a decision among competitors of who to give their business with. Because you know what? Everybody talks about inclusion. Everybody talks about the environment. So that's not special. And then the third thing is, I find that the attempts to define specialness these days are just riddled and dripping with narcissism. Okay, like it's all about the individual, and that's the wrong thing. I mean, brands are not about you. They're about them. They're about what you do in a special way that appeals to other people. And so in the face, and by the way, universal selling propositions are just laden with claptrap aspirations and narcissism. And so what I've done is I've created a solution to that. And it's a real simple solution. And it works because I've done it myself. I work with clients on it. And it's called, you don't want merely to be the best of the best. You want to be the only one who does what you do. And so what I've done is created this little tool called what I call the only statement. And it's really simple. It goes like this. We are the only ones who do such and such. We're not better. We're not best. We're not number one. We're the only. So the focus is on being the only one. Now, the interesting thing is only is a binary expression of uniqueness. It either exists or it doesn't. It can be observed, it can be measured. And so when you declare that you're the only one, get ready to be called on it, because people can see it, right? They can believe it. They know whether it's true. They know whether it's relevant, as opposed to better and best. Who knows? Who knows who defines it? Who is the custodian of best and perfect? It's a joke, quite frankly. I think it's a repugnant, intellectually dishonest way to approach the whole issue of differentiation. The only statement gets the kids off the block, Al, because it exposes you and it opens you up, right, to observation and conclusion. And so part of the planning process that I've created makes the only statement an integral part of answering the question, how are you going to compete and win? Because the answer to that question is all about how do you intend to differentiate yourself from everybody else around you. Okay, so it's a very unique, and by the way, I mean, it's really caught on. I mean, when I work with clients and actually start to do this work with them, the first thing they typically say to me was, well, Roy, we're not special in anything, right? And I say, well, you may think that you're not special, but let's do the work and we'll find out what you need to be special at to make you grow and win. And that's the end game that we're really looking at here. So it is extremely important. I mean, your show is all about business growth. Well, I got news for you. If you're not different, you're dead. You have no growth prospects at all. And the way to get there is through the only statement.
That's awesome. That's beautiful, and that's a great way to go about it, and the way you explained it is awesome. Because I hear a lot of, being in the business world is, you need to be a category of one and, all these different statements, but I don't hear anything about how to do that or how to back it up or anything like that, and like you said, it's all these different statements that everybody else is making, so how does that make you a category of one, And
well, in a way, and I don't mean to beat up this concept, but I think one of the examples that resonates with me is the whole search for the blue ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the blue ocean, in theory, is a wonderful place to be. The reality is, though, Al, most of us mere mortals, we will have to fight it out in red oceans.
Yeah.
Okay, red oceans with intense competition, fickle customers, regulations that change every day. Forget about the blue ocean. I need to make it in a red ocean. I'm a red ocean guy. Okay, I'm a guy that understands, Al, that you're fighting for your life in a red ocean, and I can help you. I can help you with simple little things like the only statement, which is the answer to how the heck do I be one of one? That's the answer, right? And the reason I know it works is because I got $1 billion in annual sales out of this approach. And every client that I've worked with goes away just starstruck over the simplicity of the idea. Okay, and it takes work, obviously, to get it, but we can talk if you want. I mean, I do plans for small businesses in 48 hours, and in the 49th hour, they're executing it. Nobody else does that. Nobody else even understands how to do that, right? And so I know it works, and it resonates. And the other cool thing is, Al, people have fun doing the work. They have fun doing the work.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. And so it's cool that you're you have the passion behind it, not just to write the books, but to actually help people. That's super awesome, because I'm sure that speeds up the their process and their growth and scalability. That's beautiful. So I was looking. Another statement that I read on the website was customer service must be memorable and designed to take the customer's breath away. So what are some simple things that can be done to improve customer experience? And just by the way, I like customer service, like in business for me, is almost everything, besides having, the best product and service kind of a thing, like taking care of the people, just wholeheartedly, without worrying about money or anything else, just taking care of them until there's that's what's brought me along in business?
Well, it's a great question, and I guess I approach it as you would expect, probably by now. I approach it rather differently than most people do it, because in order to create, whether you call them memorable experiences, I actually coined this phrase. I call them gasp-worthy experiences, right? In terms of breathless, it's gasp-worthiness is really the end game. But I've created this context of a strategy model, okay, that it was really helpful for me. Now, a service strategy in my world consists of two elements. The first element is core service. And look, that's basically what you supply. That could be your product, could be your service. But it's fundamental at the fundamental level. Without a core service, you don't have a business. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about core service, though, is it's not a source of loyalty, because people expect the boat to float. People expect the internet stream to work. People expect your core service to meet the requirements that you promise 24/7, 365. And if you do, guess what they say? Good. That's what I expected. So you're not really advancing, right, the loyalty meter by spending a whole lot of time on your core service, other than one simple thing. You have to get it right, seamless, 24/7, 365. Because if you don't do that, then you will not have any rights to the service experience game. So the experience is based on your core service being delivered immaculately every time out. And so for those of you listening who want to get into the service experience business, forget it if you can't deliver core service immaculately 24/7, 365. Go work on that, fix that. Then we'll go to the second element of the service strategy, which is basically the service experience. In a really simple way, think about a service experience is how people feel when they get their core service. So it's all about feelings, right? You may think you can measure this, right, on the inside by all these data systems. So I got news for you. It's rather challenging, without asking somebody how they feel, to measure how people feel. Okay. Now, this is all about an experience piece that really relates more to the culture of the organization and the values of the organization than it does to the product and services, right? Because you've already delivered a boat that floats. All right. So now the challenge is, how can I create an experience around that engagement process to make the customer's breath go away, to make them say, oh my God, wow, right? To be absolutely starstruck and dazzled. And look at the very first place. I know people are going to say, oh, wow, how can you? The very first thing you have to do, Al, is you have to hire people that like human beings. I know this is really sort of a mind-blowing conclusion, but it's pretty hard to dazzle anybody if the person you're dealing with doesn't like humans and doesn't want to engage with humans, who would rather be taking inventory, who would rather be writing coding, right? In other words, anything but having to deal with that customer. And yet, you will never be able to provide dazzling service experiences unless you hire the right people who are born with this innate desire to serve others. Okay. And so, other than that, that's the starting pace. I'm not a tactical guy. All right. I know I read all sorts of the same stuff you do about service experiences and using, different FAQs and AI and all this stuff. I don't believe in any of that stuff because it's tactical. If you do not have a culture, all right, that is built to serve other humans, then forget about doing anything experiential in a way that dazzles people. So I want to take you back into that world and get that right before you start to explore this other stuff, which is kind of gee whiz, sexy, boom, boom, tactical stuff. And I'm not putting that down, but I'm saying you need to have relevance around it. And it's called a culture of serving people. And so the sorts of things that I would do is I would hire for goosebumps. I would cleanse the inside. I would kill dumb rules. I would cut the crap. I would do all those sorts of things as part of a tactic built into a culture of absolutely servant leadership and serving people in a way that nobody else does. And the interesting thing to me is there's another element. It's called, do you really have a strategy when you screw a customer over? It's called service recovery. Everybody makes mistakes, and yet few realize that if you recover well, you actually build customer loyalty. The customer forgets about the fact you made a mistake, and they're just absolutely blown away by the way you recovered from it. Right. And so service recovery is a big piece of my work. Very few organizations have built a service recovery strategy, and it blows me away as to why not. Oh, wait a minute. I know why. Because everybody's trying to do it right the first time. Okay, that's a good objective. Well, let's realize sometimes you won't. And if you understood the power to building loyalty through service recovery, why wouldn't you have a strategy? I mean, hell, we had a service recovery strategy in the business. Okay, admitting that we're going to make a mistake and leveraging that fact. We call it turning an oops into a wow. Leveraging that fact into actions that actually enabled the customer to be the best referral agents ever, and it was all based on customer complaints. And so the experience thing is, just to kind of rephrase it and recap it, get your core service right, hire human being lovers, put a hiring for goosebumps process in there. And if you don't know what that is, check out, I got a million blogs that talk about this because I've been doing this since 2009. Make sure the rules and policies in your company enable people to do business with you, not piss them off. And lastly, get rid of the crap that prevents frontline people from taking care of customers, and admit that you're going to make a mistake and develop a service recovery strategy. It's fun to do.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I like that you say that you lay out the fact that you need to have a business with substance that delivers first, and then to be able to build that customer experience off of, because so many people forget about that, or they just bypass that because they don't have it. Just like,
Al, that's a great. Thank you for that comment. It's a great comment, and it speaks to what we've been talking about here. It's because the flavor of the month, okay, is the service experience. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's got their own vanilla flavor, chocolate flavor, whatever, their own flavor of how to do it. Okay, but they fail to realize, unless the basics of the business are healthy, you won't dazzle anybody. I mean, how could you possibly? It doesn't matter what you do, right? What you do with a client who you have just screwed over because you were 15 days late, right, on delivering their boat. 15 days late in providing them an internet high-speed upgrade that they needed to run their business. You promised them, and you broke your promise. You can't dazzle anybody when you break your promise on your core service. So let's get back to basics. I know you just want to get off and do the sexy shit, but you can't win that way, guys. You got to go back to the boring, humdrum basics of creating value and health within your business. That's where this all starts. Trust me. You got to start there. You got to do the work.
Yeah, definitely. It's called building a foundation, right? That's awesome.
Yes,
but yeah. So this information that you're providing is so super valuable. I hope the people listening, understand and embrace it. I'm sure they'll understand it, but embrace it and put it into their, into their business, because it could be life-changing, right? So one thing real quick is, like, it seems like by following these kinds of principles, you could, like, almost choose, like, who your customer is, or at least like in my arena, be able to get the higher end customers, that because that's what they're looking for, is substance and experience and all these different things. Is that true?
Well, yes, it is true, but I will rephrase it for you, if you will allow me. Growth in any business, okay, requires strategic context. Mm-hmm. It goes back to just the essence of what I've been talking to you about the last 24 minutes and 53 seconds. Okay, it's strategic context. What I mean by that is, a lot of people would say you need a business plan. A lot of people would say that, okay, I had to create what I call a strategic game plan that allowed me to define the context that I was working within. And that context then drove everything. It drove every marketing program. It drove the differentiation strategy. It drove customer communications. It drove the service strategy. So let me just explain. So the strategic game planning process, I call it, I can do with any client in 48 hours. And it's made by answering 3 questions. And you have to go through the process. The first question is, how big do you want to be? That's a question about top line revenue. So if you're at $1 million today, for example, my question is in 24 months, not 5 years. Don't believe in 5-year plans. The 4th year never shows up, Al. We all know that. And if you want something that's built to execute, you have a shorter time horizon. Okay. And for those people that say that's short-sighted, they're right. And if you want to talk to me about why that being short-sighted is a strategy that's worth following, we can talk about that too. 24 months, do you want to be 5 million? Do you want to be 2 million? The reason we start off with the question is that the answer to that defines the character of the strategy. Because if you only wanted to double revenues, that will lead a certain strategy. If you wanted to 5 times your revenue, that's going to be a completely different strategy, right? You follow me? That's why you start off with the numbers. The numbers drive the strategy. Now, nobody else does this, Al. Everybody else develops a strategy, and then they come up with a bunch of assumptions. Then they figure out what the financial implications are. Then they decide that those financials aren't good enough, right? You're nodding. Then they go back, change the assumptions without changing the strategy. How freaking insane is that? So first question is, how big do you want to be? And it needs to make you perspire. Like if you know how to get there, then the number isn't audacious enough. And so I keep pushing people and say, well, can you make 2 million? Oh yeah, okay, it's not big enough. Can you make 4 million? And I can start to see the beads of sweat on their forehead. I know I'm getting close to the right answer of how big. But let's suppose we decided, okay, we're going to get 5 million in top line revenue in 24 months. Second question, who do you want to serve? That's a question about where are you going to get the money? This gets to the question you just asked. The who to serve is all about defining customer groups as targets who have the latent potential to deliver the how big that you've just decided you want. Okay. So no, it's not the market. And no, it's not what you think you have. It's what you need to have to drive your growth goals. So you see the connection? Mm-hmm. You can't do the who work without doing the how big work because they're too inextricably tied. So you decide on, and obviously the fewer number of customer groups, the better. Why? Fast and easy is important in 24-month planning. You don't have time to have a 24-month selling cycle when you need to get the run rate of your revenues up fast to get to where you need to get to in 24 months. And so let's say you have 3 segments and you decide, okay, these are the customer groups we're going to go after. Okay, the second piece of work on that is to decide on and discover what they crave. So this is really a deep dive in each one of those segments about what do they crave? What are their secrets? What do they lust for? What do they covet? What do they desire? It's got nothing to do about what they need. Okay? Everybody else competes in the need space. I want you guys to compete in the craving space. Why? Because it's not price sensitive. And secondly, there's no competitors there. And so we come up with cravings. That takes us to the third and final question. How do you intend to compete and win? Just generally? No. In terms of the who segments and the cravings that you've just identified. And this is where you create the only statement, Al, is within the answer to the third. This is where you have a chance to be the only one, okay, who does what you do in terms of satisfying what the who craves. So you can see how all that fits together. That's the context. That's the beginning. So any entrepreneur out there, any business owner who wants to get something different going on in their business, take a step back. Or if you're an entrepreneur starting a business, take a step forward. Let's have a conversation around strategic game planning. Are you trying to tell me you can't spend 2 days on your business? Come on. You can't afford not to spend 2 days on your business. So this process is intended to encourage execution. That's why it's built the way it is. It's not built to satisfy the left side of your brain. It's not built to satisfy the intellect, because the intellect, quite frankly, as we all know, doesn't do anything. Right? Pondering doesn't do anything. And so I needed a planning system that facilitated execution. Okay, because the market was changing on me quickly, it was growing quickly, and I just needed a piece of that right away. And so this really helped me. I get goosebumps when I think about this. It helped us right away to get going. We weren't a step behind, we were a step ahead of the people who were employing traditional planning techniques, taking them 5 months and probably $150,000 to create. And Roy was way out in front using his head west strategy with an only statement. Boom.
That's so awesome. And you articulate that very well. And one of the things I love about your process is that it's intended to speed up, the time to value and the time to, profit for the business. And then also, like, everything is like right away. These are the things we could implement in a matter of days and not weeks or months. That's so very, very important. Especially for younger businesses that are cash strapped.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, the arguments I get are, well, wait a minute, that's short-term thinking, Roy. You're not thinking about the long term. And I go, are you? Are you trying to tell me that you can forecast what 5 years looks like? Are you trying to tell me that you are wise enough to know what's going to happen in 10 years? Like, I understand you got a 10-year strategy, which doesn't mean dick to me. And it won't mean anything in terms of maybe a banker that's interested in extrapolation and regression analysis, but it won't mean anything to a business. So the people that believe in the longer term stuff, what they're really saying, and they're couching it under words like, you need to be long-term thinking, but they're not able to understand, or they're not willing to understand, that long-term thinking is a function of short-term achievements. You can quote me on that. I've never said that before. It's a function of short-term achievements and learning along the way where the long-term lives. Because we're not smart enough today, Al, to know where we're going to end up 5 years from now. All we know is, I think the opportunity is to head west. All right, Let's build a plan around heading west. Let's start executing some stuff. Let's learn from that stuff, and let's modify our head west strategy on the run. So I call it planning on the run. Lots of content on my website talking about this, and it's all based on do it, learn, do it, execute, learn. Plan, execute, adjust. Plan, execute. So you get yourself into a do loop, and you keep doing that. And guess what? Eventually, Al, you discover that, okay, if I started out in New York City, I really am going to I'm ending up in Vancouver as opposed to Seattle. And I never would have guessed at the very beginning of this journey that was going to be the end result. And no kidding, nobody is able to do that. How can you perfect a forecasting system in an imperfect, stochastic, constantly changing, uncertain, random world? Like, I know, because my degree is in math, I know how to do a least squares fit, right, on a bunch of data. That's not what I'm talking about, right? That's just a way to approximate something. And the problem with that is, if you actually believe it's true, you're going to lead yourself to a wrong conclusion. I'm talking about doing stuff, executing stuff, learning as you go, adjusting your sights. That's the only way to make meaningful progress. And quite frankly, in my experience, the only way to grow a business. And it's hard work. There's no other way.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that evil word, hard work.
Yeah,
right on.
It is hard work.
Yeah, and that planning on the run, it sort of reminds me of a mentor I had a long time ago, and she would always say, "We're gonna build the plane as we fly it," So
that's sort of it, right? That's sort of it. Now, like, good on her. I mean, that's wise. That level of thinking is wise, because the world has been taught not to do that. The world has been taught to formularize everything. The world has been taught to AI is everything. okay,
Mhm.
as opposed to the good old fashioned have a go, see what worked, right? What worked, good. We're going to cultivate and nurture that. What didn't work, we're going to fix it and we're going to move on, right? Like the interesting thing to me is I discovered people in my organization, they love the journey. They love to do that because it gave them a piece. It gave them some control, right? By substituting, right, a human-based function with artificial intelligence is actually retrogressive in my world. I mean, there are some
Mhm.
academics around that think that's a cool thing to do. Good, good. I'm not disparaging that. But in terms of a business leader, I want engagement, Al. I want engagement. I want their hearts, their souls, their feet, their elbows, their wrists. I want it all engaged in the journey. I want them hooked. I want them to have the virus running around in them about where we're going. That's the virus I want to spread. I don't want them substituted by an algorithm that crawls the internet and grabs what people believe to be the best of the best and morphs it together where everybody's identity has been lost. Everybody's voice has been lost. Don't want that. I don't believe in it. I I I mean, technology for technology's sake is what we're talking about here. And that gets me back to the tactical conversation we had earlier. I mean, I
Mhm.
don't denigrate technology, but if you don't have a strategic context within which it's used, you have nothing. You're just chasing what I call yummy. It's yummy.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure, for sure. So yeah, there's been so many like nuggets and insights that you've shared with us. Really appreciate that. And you mentioned like the 48-hour plan that you have and stuff like that. So what does it look like to work with you?
Yeah. So what I do is I will get the organization, and by the way, it can be any organization. Al, this works. This works on for profits. It works. I've done work with not for profits. Clearly, the units are different, but the essence of the strategy and the direction and so forth is the same. So what I do is I get the leadership team of the organization in a room. There's no subject matter experts. I want the leader and the people who are accountable for the results in a room. It could be one person. I've had that situation, or it could be two or three. And I've had situations in larger organizations where we've had an executive team of 10 people, which from my point of view gets a bit of a challenge, but nevertheless, we get the job done. So we get them in the room. I kind of explain the ground rules. And one ground rule is the CEO, okay, has the same amount of authority on the decision as everybody else in the room. Because I use what we call an understand and agree process. All right, where if we reach a decision making point, I go around and ask each individual in the room, understand and agree, understand, yep, agree, yep. And if anybody even blinks, we stop. So it's really important that we get unanimity, okay, on every decision. And whereas the CEO's direction, of course, influences the way I work with the team, they still, okay, have to convince somebody who says, no, I don't agree. And so the team building aspect of this, Al, is really, really a sight to behold. People walk out and they got their back slapping and they're closer than they ever were before. And so we go through the process, and I've got an agenda, and I'm not a facilitator, okay? Like by now, I'm a content provider. So, I mean, what I do is I nudge the team towards where I think they need to go, just based on my experience and my stuff. And look at, and I have to convince them that it makes sense to do the only work. And sometimes we have to reframe their business, and I have to convince them that that's a place that they should go in their journey. But yeah, we get it done. We get the strategic plan nailed down. I call it a strategic game plan statement. And then we spend a lot of time coming up with specific objectives and accountabilities. What are the key things that we need to do to breathe life into this puppy? Not a million to-do list things, but what are the critical few, not the possible many? And that's an interesting conversation because it forces you to focus. And one of the biggest challenges an entrepreneur has is they lack focus a lot, right? So getting people used to focusing on the critical few and not chasing after things that might be fun and might be possible, that's a bit of a challenge. And so we get the strategic plan statement, we get a list of objectives in terms of here's what has to be done, by whom, by when, and then we wrap it. And we get that done in 48 hours. And typically what I will do is try and convince the team that we should have a review every 2 to 3 months of the SGP and talk about what's working, what's not working. Because at the end of the day, I mean, if the world changes dramatically, that might require a change in direction. And so we need to be online with what's going on in order to be able to accommodate that. The last thing we want to do is be chasing a strategy that's no longer relevant. And the way to do that is stay in touch with each other, stay in each other's faces all the time. And I make myself available. I'm kind of like, I'm Roy online with the executive team, helping them and answering questions and so forth. And yeah, that's the process. But we get it done in 2 days.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. Is there one like big idea or takeaway that people should take from this episode?
Yeah, you need to be the only ones who do what you do. Okay, you forget about everything else. Do the work on the strategic game plan. Figure out how big you want to be, who you want to serve, and what they crave, and how you're going to compete and win by being the only one that does what you do. If you can do that piece of work, then you will be well on underway. Forget about what they're saying about social media. Forget about all the tactical stuff. Get the hard work done. As you said, the platform, the framework, the foundation work, get it done. I just come at it a unique way. I can help you get a framework in 48 hours, whereas other people cannot do that. I'm the only one that does what I do there. So that's what I would say.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. So you obviously practice what you preach, right?
I try.
That's awesome. So, well, thank you for coming on the show and sharing your insights with us. What's the best way for people to follow you or get a hold of you?
Sure. I have a website, bedifferentorbedead.com, and I try and blog regularly. And so there's a lot of content on everything we talked about today, as well as other stuff. There's a page on my 7 books if you're interested in exploring those, and you can order them directly on the site, or you can go to your favorite book purchasing destination to do that. And then I've got a thoughtful remarks page, which I try and capture what other people say about what we do together, which might be interesting. And then I've got an email. My email address is roy.osing@gmail.com. And Al, I'm happy to have a conversation with somebody. I get emails from people going, "Hey, Roy, heard you on the blah, blah podcast. Here's my only statement. What do you think?" I love that. That's just great. It's a great way to start a relationship. It's a great way to start a conversation in it. I feel good because I've made a difference in somebody's thought process. And now they're testing it out for them. Because as I said earlier, I don't wish to be prescriptive here. I have no right to be. What I'm trying to do is share ideas that work for me, and hopefully others will decide to try them out and experience how they can work for them.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. So we'll be sure to include your links in the show notes below the episode for sure. So, and thank you again for coming on the show.
You're very welcome. I'm honored to have been asked. Believe me.
Awesome. So that concludes this episode of Podcast Marketing Secrets. This is Al Morentin signing off. I hope you have a successful day.